I honestly believe that everyone should try at least a 24-hour fast, if not just for resilience. Welcome to the podcast. I am Coach Jay. I'm here with
Coach Wendy
and
Coach Katie.
We are here today to talk about fasting,
Yes.
so not eating. We've had a few questions about this, and I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the different types of fasting, and I'll talk a little bit about my experiences. I know you've done a little bit of research on this. We'll also talk about who is maybe a good candidate for this, maybe who isn't a good candidate, and sort of what some of the benefits and drawbacks are.
Yeah.
This came up last week.
That's right.
What was a client that brought this up?
Yeah. So I have had clients in the past who are interested and just very curious about fasting because it's so prominent and such a popular thing to do. And it just piqued my curiosity. You know, I know a little bit about it, but I don't really practice it much myself. I've had some clients who've really enjoyed it and benefited from it, and others who it was a nightmare for. And so actually I kind of wanted to talk about this topic to give myself a reason to research it a little bit more. I was like, why does it work for some people and not others?
Yeah.
Anyway, that was sort of the impetus for me.
So we're going to talk about a couple different aspects of this, and I know you had some questions as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There's really kind of two types of fasting that, we talk about when we talk about this. One is just not eating for some period of time, right? So 24, 48, even up to 60 hours, people do five or 6 day fasts, and a lot of reasons for it. But I guess we are talking about it more in the range of fitness, not necessarily for religious reasons or spiritual reasons, right? It's more why would you do it related to fitness? Yeah. So the two different types that I was thinking we talk about were either that, the 24, the extended fast, or intermittent fasting, right? Can you define what intermittent fasting is?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really fancy way of saying not eating for a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And intermittent implies that it is not a perpetual or a long sustained period of fasting, what you were talking about earlier, 24, 36 hours, but shorter durations of time typically.
Yeah.
And then you can be on different schedules. Half a day, that's right.
Yeah.
Actually kind of went down a rabbit hole, and it turns out there's a whole bunch of different kind of ways to fast and ways to kind of treat intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
And some is eating nothing, but sometimes it's you just eat a lot less on those days or in those hours.
Yeah.
But I feel what we're talking about most of the time is just intermittent fasting, eating less for a specific period of time, but not for forever.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of the more popular ones from the intermittent fasting is the 16-8 fast. So basically you would eat within an 8-hour window, let's say 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then you would not eat for the rest of, for the other 16 hours. Some people narrow that down to 4 hours.
Yep.
It'll be 20 and 4. And then there are some people that will eat everything within 1 hour or 90 minutes.
One meal a
right?
day. Yeah.
1 meal a day. Yeah. Why would people do this?
Yeah.
So one big one that when some of my clients have tried this, is more so trying to focus on trying to enjoy life more versus trying to worry about when the next meal is going to happen, right? So more of a mental clarity is what I hear a lot.
Trying to enjoy life more by not
so
eating?
well, because we do kind of live in a world where we're surrounded by food all the time, right? So there's a lot of temptations, right? There's sometimes a lot of the time what people say is that they eat just because they see the food there, not because they're actually hungry.
Right.
So just kind of getting back in or more in tune on when I'm actually hungry and when I'm just bored.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's more of that I hear.
Yeah. When I've read about this, I've done this as well. It's more this is an easier way for people to lose weight.
Yeah, I feel most people approach it from that, motivation.
Yeah, lose weight, lose fat, whatever. It can be, but the mechanism is not what people think. That's been my kind of experience, or the research that I've read about it. Basically, if you're only eating within an 8-hour window, and let's say that you used to eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then now you cut out breakfast, you're just eating lunch and dinner, effectively you're eating less food, right? Yeah.
Theoretically. That's right.
Assuming you were eating the same things, the same exact things you were eating before, you're just cutting out the first meal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in theory, you would eat less. And in practice, that actually does work for people.
Yeah.
Because at first they're used to the habit of eating breakfast and then eating lunch and eating dinner. And so they just cut out the breakfast and they eat the same lunch, they eat the same dinner. And as a result, you're eating less calories. And because you're eating less calories, you tend to, lose weight.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it works.
Yep.
For people that do it long enough, you will find a way to get the calories that you need to get. And for some people, you will find a way to eat more calories than you need to get, because now it's like especially if you're going in like a really narrow window, it's like, I don't eat for a long time, and then it's this free for all. And I just have everything that I can eat. That's one of the big dangers of doing these kind of fasts. Have you found anything in your research on this?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's interesting because a lot of people approach it because they're motivated by fat loss.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like what it seems like the benefits, most of the benefits are from the research. That's the one where the benefits are most mixed for that reason exactly. Is like it really depends person to person, the effect that fast has, like the duration of the fast, their history, their relationship with food, all of that matters.
Yeah.
But what the research is clear on is that it has all these other benefits, or it can have all these other benefits if it's like done, well, that are more related to like aging, like helping people live longer is one, or reducing risk of cancer is actually another, or even for some people, like helping with recovery and inflammation. Like you just had that experience,
Yeah. So I've done intermittent fasting. I've done long duration fasting. I've played around with the timing of meals. Like for a long time, I didn't eat breakfast. Like I've done a lot of these different things. And when I find something that's interesting, I'll try the thing and see if it will actually work for me. My experience is, yes, you can lose weight doing this, right?
Yeah.
But also you can gain weight doing this, right? It depends on how many calories you're eating. Like one of the things after trying all the different diets, you guys are both nutrition coaches, they all work.
Yeah.
Every single one works. They all work the same way, basically. You eat less calories than you burn.
Yeah.
Right? And whether you're narrowing the window that you eat it in, like I'm only going to eat it in this 4-hour window, or you narrow the type of foods that you eat, like I'm only going to eat meat and, vegetables, right? Or let's say you're a vegan, you're only eating vegetables. All of those things can help you lose weight, but they do it with the same mechanism, which is you're eating less calories than you burn, right? And so it's more of a behavioral thing. Like it changes your behavior, and because your behavior is changing, then you're able to get a different outcome. Yeah. But the biggest benefits I've found have nothing to do with weight loss. It's all the stuff that you just mentioned. And that's actually one of the reasons why it's a decent thing to do.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're doing it just for weight loss, you can blow it. Like you can blow it just like anything else.
Right.
It's like there's a lot of good stuff that you can eat between 10 and 6 o'clock.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you're doing it for other reasons, then it actually works really well. Right? So some of the biggest benefits for me are like basically your body, when you're eating food, it's always processing things. And so the old school method of like eating 6 meals a day, like as a bodybuilder, it basically means that you're either working out or eating food or processing food constantly. Yeah. And so your body's working constantly, right? And so like all the systems of your body, all the energy goes to processing this food or recovering from your workout. But if you cut the window from when you eat food, then your body doesn't have to work on processing that food. And so your body works on all of the other things that it has to do, right? And one of the reasons I like to do fasting is because when I don't eat, then I tend to feel better, right? My sort of general level of inflammation goes down, right? And I kind of explained inflammation to a client recently. I don't think everyone knows what that is. Yeah. How would you describe inflammation?
So, I mean, like technically what's happening is like your immune system, a huge part of it surrounds the gut for good reason, because everything that you take in, like this is your interaction with the outside environment. So you take in food, like your body wants to make especially sure that what you've taken in is okay. Yeah. And so it's no matter what, whether that food is a food that is absolutely okay for you or a food that's going to do you harm, your immune system gets fired up because it has to run that check.
Yep.
Basically. And you have this like whole system of lymph that surrounds your blood vessels that eventually absorb the nutrients. But long story short, like it gets activated every time you eat food.
Yep.
Now, sometimes, depending on genetics and all these other things, it will become overactive. Like it may go to attack a food that for someone else may be totally harmless.
Yep.
But or it may attack a food that is like actually a really good reason. Maybe it's poisonous or there's something wrong.
Yeah.
But long story short, each time you eat, you are triggering this like slight immune response. And so inflammation just refers to like a rush of lymph to wherever it is. So for a lot of people, it's your gut, and it's the thing is like you often won't even feel it in your gut. Not the same as you feel if you like hurt your hand and you get that same kind of swelling. But you can imagine that's basically what's happening in your body.
And it's your body's way of like, getting rid of poisons and things, right? And so most people experience inflammation like when you have a fever, right? It's just like your body is fighting off some sort of flu or whatever, and your temperature starts to rise, and then it rises to the point where it's like so high that the fever sort of breaks, right? You get to whatever, 102 or whatever, and then you get this big sweat, and then you start to feel better, right? And it's like the whole level of inflammation kind of drops. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah, you're looking at me really skeptically, Wendy.
No, I mean, because I know this because I have a son. So
every time he gets sick, he gets a fever.
Yeah, or whenever he gets shots, right? He gets a fever because of that. So
and so your body, this is how your body protects itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the things, like the quality of the food that you eat actually matters. And one of the biggest things that there's lots of things that cause inflammation, but one of the things we do intentionally that causes inflammation is drink alcohol. It's like you're drinking poison, and now your body has to recover from this.
Right.
It's part of why you feel like crap the next day is because you're dehydrated and your body's recovering from this poison that you've put in it, right? So imagine your body has like the capacity to handle, only so much poison, right? And you purposefully ingest a poison. Now your body has to process this thing, and it takes resources from every other part of your body, right? Now imagine your body has to process nothing. It can then divert those resources to other parts of your body.
Right.
So that same inflammation that helps you process alcohol also helps you process a sore elbow, right?
Yeah.
And so you got this sore elbow, and you've been drinking a lot of alcohol, the elbow doesn't get better.
Yeah.
You cut out alcohol, you cut out any other foods that cause problems, your elbow starts to feel better.
Yeah.
And effectively, fasting has that same effect. You're not only cutting out alcohol, but you're cutting out everything.
Yeah.
Right? So if I cut out everything for 24, 48 hours, all my aches and pains feel better.
Yeah.
That's like legit been my experience. Right?
So that's saying that person's eating whole foods and it's not eating like hot Cheetos with that window hour. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, because of those, I mean, that hot Cheeto will give you that inflammation anyways, no matter when you eat it.
I mean, here's the thing, like all food's going to give you some sort of inflammation.
Right.
Some is going to be worse than others.
That's right.
Yes.
Right?
And it's why like oftentimes we advise people against processed food because your body doesn't recognize it. Like it's so foreign that oftentimes the inflammatory response is so much greater.
Yeah. And part of it is like, if you don't eat some of that stuff, then your body isn't resilient to it.
Okay.
Like, believe it or not, when you eat vegetables, like vegetables are like low level poisonous, right? But they're such a low level that it just gives your body like, okay, this is like working out a muscle, right? Like I'm working out a muscle and I'm resolving this poison, and it makes me stronger.
Well, I think that's where people get confused, right? I mean, a lot of people, and maybe because they haven't really done the research, right? They think, okay, I have this amount of hours to eat, so I can pretty much eat whatever I want within that window, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding on what that actually means, right?
Well, I mean, okay, so that it depends on your goals. The truth is you can eat more of what you want if you narrow the window down, because you give your body a lot more time to recover from that, right? But just like anything else, like, you have this 4-hour window and you drink a full bottle of vodka, it's going to take you a long time to recover from that bottle of vodka, no matter how long you drank it. Does that make sense?
I would die. If I drink a bottle of vodka in 4 hours, forget about it. I'm gone from this planet.
You go to Pluto. See you.
Game over. I won't care a bit about inflammation because I will be Lying.
But it is the funny thing. Like a lot of times when people talk about like even like keto diets or like vegan diets, some of it is like some people respond better to not eating meat. Some people respond better to only eating meat. And as a result, both groups feel better when they are on their particular diet, right? Because there's a lower inflammatory response for them. And so they just feel generally better, right? When you think about fasting, it's like you don't have any of that stuff. So your body has no chance to react to any of that stuff. So your inflammatory response in general is super low.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so like I did a 36-hour fast this week.
You did?
In preparation for this. Yeah.
Oh, when did you do that?
Monday through Tuesday. So Sunday night was my last meal, and then I didn't eat again until noon on Tuesday. Wow. Right. So yesterday when you saw me, right? It was about noon.
Didn't even notice you were fasting.
Yeah. So I've done it a few times before. So
next time walking around with a sign that says fasting.
Yeah.
Ask me about.
So, because how many calories do you eat? Like, let's just say when you're on your normal eating day.
Somewhere between 2,400 and 3,000.
Okay. And then going from that to nothing.
Yeah. I've done a lot of fasts.
Yeah.
Right? 24. I mean, there was a period where every week I was doing a 36-hour fast.
I remember that.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing about fasting. Like once you get used to it, then like when you first do it, you think you're going to die. And it's funny because anytime I mention fasting, you and Rebecca are like, oh my God, like you're fucking crazy. Why would you ever do that? Right. And it's like, the truth is like the first time you do it sucks.
Yeah.
The second time is a little better. The third time is a little better. And the fourth time you're like, why was this such a big deal? Right. So you do get used to it. Right. You kind of learn what your body, like you can literally go for 40 days without food. Right. Like a long time without food. Right. In fact, it's like 3 weeks, I think, is the sort of maximum guideline without food. A lot of people have done longer, right? So the fact that you don't have food for one day is not going to change materially anything about your life, right? But it's really interesting. Once you've done it a few times, you don't have all the ups and downs, and you actually feel pretty amazing the entire time, right? So for me, the reason I did it partially was this podcast we were going to talk about. I figured I'd talk about it, but partially because I've been dealing with all these little aches and pains. Right. And, I eat a pretty like low inflammatory diet and they weren't going away.
I see.
And so I was like, I wonder, for a while when I was doing fasting, I was feeling great. Let me see what will happen if I do this for a day and a half. And it made a huge difference. Like the stuff is not completely gone, but like I felt pretty great. Yeah. And, I think it was like an hour after my first meal, I was going for a 1-rep max deadlift. And I was pretty close. I didn't get it, but I was pretty close. So it didn't actually materially impact my performance either. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's the same for everyone, like fasting and also in workouts, performance-wise.
So I guess we can talk about who is this for and that kind of thing. So I would say, when we talked about intermittent fasting and how you might do it, you would have a window. We can talk about like longer term fasts. For me, like somewhere between 1.5 to like 3 days is the longest I like to go. Maybe 3.5 days, something like that. And part of the benefit that you get is you get this low inflammatory response, like you start to feel better, you have more energy, but you're talking about preventing cancers and diseases. After about, I think it was somewhere between 36 and 48 hours, your body starts to kill off like dead cells.
That's right.
Yeah. So autophagy.
Yeah.
Did your research talk about that?
Yeah, totally.
What is that?
So it's like, okay, so what happens is your cells have a natural life cycle, and at a certain point they die. And part of what happens when we age is like the rate of cell death increases. And what happens is when cells die, they can create these problematic responses for our bodies. And our bodies actually aren't that good at removing those dead cells. Probably it's like our bodies have other things to do. It's like, okay, a cell just died. I'm going to just like let it hang out over there. I got work to do over here is kind of what happens, right? But the problem about that is that like those dead cells can actually still impact you, increase inflammation, do these other things. So when you fast, it actually improves, and it's not immediate. I think it's what I read was after it's like 8 to 12 hours, is what it takes for your body to actually kind of get around to some of those dead cells and start clearing them out. But what was so fascinating is like they were talking about how so much of this research is done on mice. And so that's one thing that's like a little bit challenging. It's like,
it's a little faster.
First turnover. It's like a little bit easier from an ethical standpoint to like experiment on those little guys. But what's fascinating too is that like what has been found is that mice live so much longer when they're fasted, or they aren't given unlimited opportunities to eat. And so now at like labs everywhere in the US, like mice aren't given freedom to eat. Like they're fed once a day, and that's just the way it is because it extends the life of the mouse.
Yeah.
So and part of that is because of the effect that it has on clearing out old dead cells.
Yeah, which is one of the things that helps you feel better.
That's right.
When you're doing this. Yeah. So you can get, that's right. It was 8 to 12 hours. So if you did a 16-hour fast, those last like 4 or 5 hours, you're starting to feel great. Yeah. That's one of the reasons I do it. That's one of the ways that it helps me. Now, does it work for everybody? Who is it for and who isn't it for? Okay, so I'll just say like the sweeping statement. I honestly believe that everyone should try at least a 24-hour fast. If not, just for resilience, right? Because knowing that you can survive a full day without eating actually makes you feel more confident if you're ever in a situation where you don't have food. Does that make sense? Right? So like, for example, when I fly to the UK, it's an overnight flight, and I don't want to eat any of the food on the plane. It's terrible. Like it's really terrible. And I actually find if I fast and then I go right into the day and I try to, get a normal routine, then I'll sleep better that night, right? Which helps me with jet lag. And so I can essentially go 24 hours without eating and adapt to that environment a little bit faster if I fast. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's like, I encourage everyone to try it once, right? It doesn't mean that it is for everybody. In terms of like people, who might benefit from like an intermittent fasting or whatever, I think it's different based on where you are, right? So I think if you really struggle with discipline around eating, like you're just eating constantly, then limiting your window will help like create some discipline. Like skipping breakfast will be a choice, right? And then, okay, I can't eat until noon. Even if you overeat from noon to 8, at least you've now exercised some discipline, right? And I think that's really helpful. I think people that have sort of hormone dysregulation probably want to avoid fasting. It's just been in my experience working with folks. It's like when you start to have thyroid issues and things like that, like you really want to make sure you're eating more regularly.
Right.
This is assuming that you're in decent health and don't have anything kind of there. We talked about this a little bit before. I think it can be more effective in general for men than for women, just because of the hormone balance. Like men don't have as much stuff going on as women do, as we talked about a few weeks ago. If you're going to consider doing this, then it's something that, you want to make sure that like everything is good. You don't have any major health issues. And then if you decide, okay, yes, I'd like to do this, I wouldn't just go all in on like, I'm going to do a 16/8 fast. Yeah. Right. I would start with something like, if you're normally eating breakfast at 8 a.m., maybe you push it back to 10 a.m. Yeah. Right. And then you do that for a week or two, and then you could push it back to noon. Right. And so now you're, kind of in that window. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Personally, I found that like, depending on when I worked out, that would depend on when I wanted to eat, right? And if I was working out, let's say at noon, I generally want to eat something before that. So I would have to eat breakfast, basically.
I see.
Right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So you're pretty much planning your window of eating around your workout schedule.
Sometimes. Okay. Yeah. I mean, if I work out first thing in the morning, it's usually on an empty stomach. Right. Yeah, I don't usually eat anything, right? But again, like everyone's different. Some people do great on an empty stomach. Some people are horrible. Yep. Right. I mean, you could train yourself to be great at it, but it may take you more work than you're willing to put in. Yeah. I first got into fasting when I read some research about like life extension and autophagy and that kind of thing. It was basically saying like once a month do a 24 to 36 hour fast. Yeah. I was like, great, let me try that. And it was really brutal. It was really, really awful. Like the first time you do a fast is the worst, is absolutely the worst. Yeah. Right. So, if you're going to try it, you got that to look forward to. Right. But once you kind of get through that, like the next time you do it is easier because you start to recognize like when it gets to lunchtime and you're being all dramatic that you have to have lunch, actually you'll survive that.
There's so much good stuff here. Like, I feel like, so there's the question of like, who should do it? Yeah. Then there's the question of like, how much is enough?
Yep.
Which this was something that like I was really interested in was like, okay, so say I want to do a 24-hour fast. Or I have a client who I think will benefit from a 24-hour fast. Yeah. Are they doing this every week? Are they doing this once a month? Like, what's the data on that? Yeah. And it's interesting. Like it's not like perfectly clear. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But at least anecdotally from a lot of the stuff that I read, it was like once a day or once a week. Doing something like a 24-hour fast seemed to be great. But beyond that, actually, oftentimes the negative outweighed some of the positive in that, like, the increase, like you talked about hormones and the impact on hormones. Like, when you're not eating, you are actually creating a little bit of a stress. Yeah. And especially for women who are, like, working out a lot. So you have, like, somebody who already is more sensitive hormonally, and then also you have a high stress demand. And then maybe you're a single mother, right? Mm-hmm. And like you've got other things going on that are also increasing your stress demand. Yeah. If you start to like push the edges of that fast, like oftentimes it will just create a poor stress response. Yeah. And your body will just become more inflamed, and there will be like a host of other hormonal issues that will ensue. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But like finding the sweet spot is like something that will like vary a little bit, but at least what I found was usually for most people, unless you're like very advanced or have done it for a long time, more than 24 hours a week is kind of diminishing returns. Yeah.
I mean, even once a week is like kind
of a lot. It would be like, and even that I was reading was like as an advanced strategy. Whereas like something what you mentioned where it's like, well, just pushing your first meal back a little bit can help, or you might feel a little bit different. Yeah. Or even if you are somebody who is an athlete or you have a lot of other stresses in your life, one cool strategy that I came across was like intermittent fasting light or like IF light, which is simply following your body's hunger cues. So if that means that you wake up in the morning and you're not hungry until noon, you don't force a breakfast. Yeah. You just kind of follow those signals. And then likewise, like if you're kind of done after 8 p.m., then you're done after 8 p.m. And it's kind of like a one way of testing the waters without really adding a huge additional stress.
Yeah. We were talking about like kind of the evolutionary kind of, the roots of this. And, we were kind of guessing, so we may not be right. But it's like for men, like basically you go out and hunt and you bring a bunch of the food home and then you eat, you feast, you rest, and then you don't eat for a while and you get hungry again and you get more focused and you have more energy to go out to the next hunt, right? Yeah. But for women, it's like the opposite, right?
Yeah, so women, like the physiological necessity is like protect the baby, basically, or have enough nutrients in the event that you get pregnant. Mm-hmm. And so for men, in periods of starvation, it's like blood goes to the limbs, blood goes to the brain, because you have to figure out how to get more food, and then you have to go out and get it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But for women, it's like all the blood goes to the organs, basically to keep organs functioning, to preserve energy. You're not liberating any more energy into the bloodstream, like you're keeping it all in. And so the response is then to like do less activity. And typically you're gonna like feel a little bit more lethargic. Mm-hmm. That's why like it's one of the reasons why I wanted to study this was because I have a female client for whom like intermittent fasting has really worked for her. Yeah. And I'm like, this is so interesting because like for everything, and I keep checking in, like, okay, is this causing overeating on the other end? Like how's your energy? How are your workouts? Yeah. And it's like all systems go, which is awesome. So it's like, great, then keep doing it. Yeah. Because Yeah,
and that's the thing is like, this is why I kind of encourage everyone to try it once. Because you'll start to feel those things. And if you're feeling like, wow, this is really making me weak and it's awful, great, it's probably not for you. Right. right? If you find like, wow, I am so much more focused and like getting so much done and like I have all this energy, okay, great, there may be something to explore there. Yeah. Right?
I did find that like, it seems like if your goal is performance, if that's kind of like your top priority in the gym, I'm not sure this would be the best thing for you. It seems like there are ways that you can do it to like minimize the impact, but it is a little bit harder if your goals are like around, increasing your muscle or increasing strength or increasing performance to a great deal.
So that's interesting because I've actually found the opposite to be true depending on the event.
Yeah, that's right. That makes a ton of sense.
So if I'm doing like most of the stuff we do in here, fasting helps, right? But if it's a longer, like beyond 30 minutes straight of activity, then it starts to drop off. Like you just don't have enough like glucogen in your, in your body to burn, right? And so, is it glucogen? It's like glycogen. Yeah. You don't have enough sugar basically to burn, and so you just hit a wall.
Yeah.
Right. But and I found the same when it was going super low carb. It's just like everything that's under, 15, 20 minutes, you're doing fine. Yeah. Right. Lifts are great, all that kind of stuff. But anything beyond that, you're absolutely going to hit a wall. Yeah. So if you go out for a 45-minute run, like it's going to hurt. If you're really running hard, it's going to hurt if you've done a fast that day, right? You're going to feel weak towards the end of it. Yeah. You had a few more questions, Wendy, or was that it?
I think that's it. Yeah. This is great.
So, I would say that this is one of those things, just like every other nutrition intervention, it's one of those things where we can make a recommendation of something you can try, but you have to try it and experience it and pay attention to what you feel before you make it the thing that you do. I think so often when we sit in that room and we talk nutrition, people think, okay, I'm going to take this thing and it's just going to be the thing that works for me. Right. And if you listen to this podcast, like, great, fasting, I'm doing it once a week, 24 hours, no problem. Yeah. It's like, you might want to try it first and see how you actually feel before you go all in on that being your thing.
Yeah. And it is true. There are definitely groups of people who I probably would not recommend it for in any kind of way. And one of those groups is like people who have histories of disordered eating.
Yeah, of course.
Like if that's this is kind of something that's going to mimic that like binge purge thing. If that's a thing, especially if it's in your recent past, like probably going to take a pass on it.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, testing it can be helpful because you might learn that, like everything that I was reading, it was like intermittent fasting doesn't bypass the general principles of good nutrition, which is like, to your point, like if you intermittent fast and just eat a bunch of hot Cheetos in your eating window, like it's not really going to have the same benefits. But that's something that you can learn about yourself by testing it is like, okay, can I come out of this fast and eat nutritious food and not overeat it?
Yeah.
And a lot of people can. And this is like mind blowing to me because like never in my life have I done like any kind of starvation experiment. I mean, not calling this anyways, any kind of like long-term fasting experiment and been normal coming out of it. I've been like fiendish for food. And if that's you, then like, probably not going to be the best strategy.
Yeah.
Is one of them.
Yeah. It really also depends what is your intention going in. If my intention going in is like, I'm going to fast for a day or two and I'm going to lose 5 pounds. It's like, that's not like I'm going to have to grind through it.
That's right.
Right. But if it's like I'm doing this to sort of clear the decks for myself, then it's actually much easier. And then when the time comes up where I'm hungry at lunchtime or dinner time, it's like, okay, cool. I mean, I'll just wait until tomorrow to eat. Yeah. And going in with that intention, it's actually easier to stick to your normal, nutrition routine when you come off of it.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, great, like I did this to feel better.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go straight to the hot Cheetos because I know that's going to make me feel worse.
Yeah.
Right.
And like having stuff prepared ahead of time so that when you come out of your fast, you're not like left with zero food or something like that can really help too.
Yeah.
You have a go-to that's like, and as long as that first meal after your fast is a good, healthy and you feel good about it, I think it can help a lot.
Yeah. So for the right people, if you're thinking about doing this, I would start by just pushing your breakfast back and eventually moving that breakfast to lunch, if that's what you wanted to try, and go for that sort of 8 hours of eating, 16 hours of fasting, because you'll get like a good 70% of the benefit doing that, right?
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to take it to the next level, then you can try a full 24-hour fast. Like you eat dinner the night before, and then you don't eat again until the next night. Usually I will do a 36-hour fast. So it's basically like I eat dinner on Sunday, and then I didn't eat until lunch again on Tuesday, right? And that way I get the night's sleep as well, and I can see how that's impacted. And so that's, and I've done up to like 3 days, which day 2 is pretty bad if you do that. So that's like a little more extreme, and only if you're really ready to white knuckle it.
Well, and then what do you expect? So, okay, so I decide I'm going to fast for 24 hours.
Yep.
Hunger wise, like, how are you going to feel? You kind of just went through this. So I thought, well, like, I thought it was kind of interesting when you were describing to me, like, how your hunger actually was affected.
Yeah. So what happens is if you normally eat at 8 o'clock in the morning, then you're going to be hungry at 8 o'clock in the morning. Right. Like, and once it gets to, so at 8 o'clock, you'll start to feel all the things, like there'll be cues around you that it's time to eat, and you will feel the most hungry right there. If you wait until 8:45 and the worst of that hunger kind of goes, then it will be gone.
Yeah.
Right. At 8:45, it's just like, I'm not hungry anymore. And then when it's lunchtime, you'll be hungry again. Let's say at noon or whatever, you'll start to be hungry again, and it'll hit you just a little bit harder, right? Because you didn't eat lunch and now you know, or you didn't eat breakfast and now you know you didn't eat breakfast. Lunch comes around, it's going to hit you harder, wait a half hour, and it goes away, right? Same thing with dinner. Dinner is actually not as bad, unless it's your first time, then it's like way worse. But like, it's not as bad, but you still feel the hunger around the same time you would normally eat dinner. And it, again, 30, 45 minutes and it goes away. It's super interesting how your body kind of relates to that hunger. For me, I drink black coffee in the morning, like 1 cup of that, and then I'll just drink water for the rest of the day. And usually what I'll do to sort of mitigate that is the times that I would normally eat, I'll go for a walk or I'll be doing some sort of work so that I just like have something else to think about.
Yeah.
Because if you are sitting in the kitchen while everyone else is eating and you're not eating, it's going to be way worse.
That's right.
Right. So yeah, that's kind of how it goes. And then if you're doing a full 36-hour fast, that first night of sleep can be a little bit rough. Like, you know, what happens when for me anyway, when your body starts to reduce inflammation, like you have to get up and pee a lot because your body's releasing a bunch of water that it was holding, right? So you get up and pee a lot, and when you get up, your heart rate is a little bit higher. After doing, you know, I did this every week for 12 weeks. After 3 weeks, your sleep is actually way better, right? It's like better than normal. I found after that first night, I have the Oura Ring, and it was tracking my heart rate variability, which is like a sign of recovery.
Yeah.
I got the highest reading that I've gotten in the last 6 months after doing this fast. So my recovery rate was like way higher.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. My heart rate was normal. My breathing was normal. My recovery rate was like crazy high. So that meant the next day I actually felt even better. Right. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it was for me. And I actually considered going for a full like 72 hours. But I was like, I don't need to prove anything for this podcast.
That's right. But that's a perfect example of like more isn't always more either. It's like the benefits that you achieve from 24 or 36 hours, like may or may not even be that great.
Yeah.
You know, after 72. I mean, maybe physiologically they are fine after 72, but if the impact on the rest of your week is that you're now like, you don't have great energy, or, you know, it's like, is it worth it?
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
But I love this notion of like being able to learn that hunger doesn't just like escalate. And once you have it, it doesn't go away and it only gets worse. But that like it does sort of naturally dip like this. Yeah. Because how many clients have you had that it's like, oh man, I didn't pack a snack when I went out to run a bunch of errands, and I ended up stopping at Chick-fil-A because like I got so hungry and that was like the only thing that was around. But like if you have that learning of like, oh, you know what? I'm hungry. I don't see anything around here. Like, let me treat this as a little like mini fast, right?
Yeah.
You kind of enter that mindset. It really changes the game.
Yeah.
So I sort of like love having had that experience. Like, oh man, maybe changes the decision that you make in those moments.
And that's why I stopped eating on the plane is because of that. I was just like, this food is terrible, and they keep shoving it in your face. Like, why do we feel like we have to eat it? Right? And it's like, well, actually, I've not eaten for a full day. I can last 12 hours on a plane.
Right. Yeah,
just
I
bring
never
me some water.
Yeah, and like,
Actually,
you know it's
never
going to
ate
go away.
the food from the plane.
Me
I never
either.
do.
Yeah.
Having
I skip
pretzels.
it.
Forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just like, you know, and that's the thing. Maybe you get home and you haven't gone to the grocery store, and you know, like you don't have any good like food to eat, and the only other option is to go to In-N-Out Burger. It's like, you don't have to eat. You know, that's not the best strategy forever, but it's just like, maybe you go to the grocery store first thing in the morning and make sure you have food the next day instead of having a double, right? Although you said you can't have one on that video.
Wait, what? What'd you say?
Remember that little short video? You said you can't eat doubles. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's a bad example. But, the point is this, like, if you know you have the ability to do it, then you can exercise that, right? Rather than making a choice that would be worse for you in the long run.
Yeah.
So all this, like, it just around habits. Like, it's what I'm hearing. It's just all about cleaning just your habits.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's pretty much the same thing as doing the cold plunge every day. It's just like, this thing kind of sucks, right? But I get into it every single day to prove to myself, okay, I can do a hard thing today.
And also think as well, and
wax philosophic.
And also give a summary of what happened the day before, and gave us stories about Tiger too as well, Tiger stories.
But I mean, that's it. It's like, it's a little bit of an exercise in discipline, but it can go too far. So you want to be careful with that.
Yeah.
If you look at it like that, it actually can be really helpful for weight loss. If you're doing it strictly for weight loss, like it's like really hard for you, there are better ways to do it.
Yeah.
That's right.
So awesome. I think that's a good place to end it. All right.
Sweet.
We answered all your questions on fasting.
Yes.
Excellent.
Nice.
All right. We will see you all next time.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, we've got plenty of others. Go check out this one over here.